The ethnic group we chose was the Native Americans. Native Americans have been in a constant struggle for rights and equality since the white settlers sailed and arrived in America. Some events were so outrageous that they had to be taken into court. The first case is Johnson versus McIntosh, which was dealing with the state of Illinois and the Piankashaw. The case began in the late 1700s that was being dealt with land rights after the natives were denied the right to convey their land. The case ended with the court favoring McIntosh, but they also had balanced the distribution between natives and settlers. Another case was the Cherokee Nation versus the state of Georgia. On Saturday, March 5, 1831, the trial was dealing again with land rights because of the settlers moving into Georgia. The case ended with a treaty stating that the Cherokee can stay in their territory and won't have to move because of the settlers. Another case was Samuel A. Worcester versus the state of Georgia. In 1832 of January, Worcester was a missionary who was arrested due to the fact that he did not have a Georgia state permit to live and practice on Cherokee land. The case was then presented to the Supreme Court after he appealed the case and became the representatives for the Cherokees. The court ended with winning the favor for Worcester and agreed to establish the Cherokees as an independent nation. But even with court cases, Native Americans were not able to have the same equality as everyone else. There then had to be laws passed out for the Native Americans. In 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act was designed for Native Americans. They are given citizenship by the government to those who are born in the U.S. The act was created so that Native Americans could have the same rights as regular citizens did. In 1975, the Indian Self-Determination and Educational Assistance Act was created. It is a law deciding that Native Americans were now given the right to create their own schools and to teach in their own ways by their own language and ideas. Also, that the Native Americans are allowed to go to college for free. In 1988, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act was created. This law was passed to balance the wildlife and game in the native land.
One of the most influential civil rights leaders in the American Indian movement was Dennis Banks. Dennis J. Banks was a militant Chippewa Indian who founded the American Indian movement in 1968 and led often violent insurrections to protest the treatment of Native Americans and the nation's history of injustices against its indigenous people. Another key figure in the Native American civil rights movement was Russell Means. The Native American activist and actor Russell Means is known for leading an armed takeover of Wounded Knee, South Dakota in 1973, and for appearing in films like The Last Mohawkins. In 2007, he helped draft a proposal to create a new nation for the Lakota tribe. Another key figure in the American Indian movement was Clyde Bellecourt. As one of the original founders of the AIM, Clyde Bellecourt has been an activist for the rights of Native Americans for many years. Many have questioned Bellecourt's methods, but no one questions his dedication to improving the lives of his people. One of the improvements made for Native Americans in their civil rights movement was the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. The Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, was enacted in 1978 in response to a crisis affecting American Indian and Alaskan Native children's families and their tribes. The intent of Congress under ICWA was to protect the best interests of Indian children and to promote stability and security of Indian tribes and their families. Another improvement was the Religious Freedom Act. The Federal Religious Freedom Act, commonly known as RFRA, was passed in 1993 to provide stronger protection for religious free exercise. Since that time, it has become part of the national debate over same-sex marriage and religious freedom. This article provides an overview of the federal act and some brief information about similar state laws and current issues. Some things that Native Americans want changed is the Native Americans need to be able to own their own land. Reservations are held in trust for Indians by the federal government. The goal of this policy was originally to keep Indians contained to certain lands. Now it has shifted to preserving these lands for indigenous people. But the effect is the same. Indians can't own land, so they can't build equity. This prevents American Indians from reaping numerous benefits from owning land.